When a prejudiced waitress chooses to deliver subpar service to a black woman, she never anticipates the shock that awaits her. As the owner of the restaurant overhears her, he utters a single sentence that flips her world upside down. "What did you just say to my mother?" This powerful moment holds a mirror to societal biases, leaving audiences reflecting on their own experiences. If you've ever faced a similar situation, share your story in the comments below. Angela Harris stepped into the elegant restaurant, her heels echoing softly against the gleaming wooden floor. The space exuded a sense of refined luxury, with dim lighting casting a warm glow and the gentle murmur of conversation blending seamlessly with the clink of crystal glasses. Her lips curved into a soft smile as she absorbed the ambiance. This was her son Chris's masterpiece, a testament to his relentless effort and unyielding dedication. Tonight, Angela had come to mark both a personal milestone and her son's incredible achievements. Chris had urged her to visit for a celebratory dinner, promising to join her later for dessert, after ensuring all was running smoothly behind the scenes. True to his grounded nature, Chris rarely mentioned his ownership, preferring to observe the restaurant's rhythm from the shadows, a trait Angela deeply admired. "Table for one?" the hostess asked, her expression warm and inviting. "Yes, but someone will join me later," Angela replied with a polite nod. "I'll start on my own." "Right this way," the hostess said, guiding Angela to a cozy table by the window. The view of the city's sparkling skyline enhanced the restaurant's sophisticated charm. Settling into her chair, Angela adjusted her sleek navy dress and opened the menu, a swell of pride washing over her. She could almost picture Chris meticulously orchestrating the evening's operations, ensuring perfection in every detail. Moments later, a waitress approached. Her demeanor starkly contrasted with the welcoming atmosphere. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, her face sharp with a detached air, and her posture rigid. "Water?" she asked abruptly, her eyes avoiding Angela's. "Yes, please," Angela replied, offering a warm smile despite the cold reception. The waitress returned quickly, setting the glass down with an audible thud. Angela paused, taken aback by the curt manner, but choosing to give the benefit of the doubt. "Thank you," she said softly. Without a word, the waitress flipped open her notepad, ready to take the order. "I'll have the house salad to start, followed by the grilled salmon," Angela said. The waitress jotted down the order hastily and turned away without acknowledgement. Angela's eyes followed her as she moved to another table, where her demeanor transformed. Bright smiles and cheerful conversation flowed freely. Angela shook her head, dismissing the interaction. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, and she refused to let a minor inconvenience dampen her mood. Still, the stark contrast in service left an uneasy feeling lingering in the back of her mind. As the minutes ticked by, Angela found her patience wearing thin. Her salad had been cleared long ago, yet there was no sign of her main course. She checked her phone, noting the time, and glanced around the bustling dining room. Other patrons who had arrived much later were already enjoying their meals, served by attentive and affable staff. Meanwhile, Angela spotted the waitress, now leaning casually against a counter, engrossed in conversation with another table. Taking a steadying breath, Angela raised her hand to signal the waitress. After a moment's hesitation, the waitress rolled her eyes and sauntered over. "Yes?" she asked flatly, her tone oozing disinterest. Angela kept her composure, though her frustration was evident. "I've been waiting quite a while for my entree. Could you please check on it?" The waitress shrugged nonchalantly. "The kitchen's busy. It'll come out when it's ready." Angela's brow furrowed. "I understand, but I've noticed tables that ordered after me have already been served." A faint smirk tugged at the waitress's lips. "Maybe they didn't order something complicated like salmon. That takes time." Angela's gaze remained steady. "I'm quite certain it doesn't take 30 minutes. I'd appreciate it if you could check on my order." With an exaggerated sigh, the waitress spun on her heel and disappeared toward the kitchen. Angela's spirits sank further, the joy of the evening replaced by a sour disappointment. Across the room, another server approached a table, delivering warm bread with a smile and engaging warmly with the diners. The contrast was glaring. and left Angela questioning the reasons behind her treatment. Several more minutes crawled by before the waitress reappeared, still empty-handed. Her expression radiated irritation. "Well," Angela prompted, her voice calm but firm. "Your food's still not ready," the waitress replied, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Like I said, salmon takes time." Angela leaned forward, her patience near its limit. "And as I said, other tables have been served before me. Can you explain why?" The waitress hesitated, her smirk faltering briefly before she snapped. "Maybe they didn't sit here nitpicking every little thing. I'm doing my job." Angela's jaw tightened, her voice unwavering. "Your job involves providing equitable service to all patrons. If there's an issue with my order..." The tense interaction was interrupted as a familiar figure stepped into view. Chris, Angela's son, had arrived unnoticed, having observed the scene unfold. Standing tall, his voice cut through the air like a blade. "What did you just say to my mother?" Angela maintained her composure, though her patience was hanging by a thread. She stared at Emily, carefully considering her words. "I would appreciate honesty over excuses," Angela said, her tone measured but firm. Emily let out a dry laugh, her eyes narrowing. "Fine," she replied, voice tinged with condescension. "I'll let the kitchen know you're upset, but don't expect that to magically speed things up. Maybe you should relax." Angela's gaze didn't falter, though her frustration simmered just beneath the surface. "Perhaps you should consider how your tone and behavior reflect on this establishment," she said calmly. "I came here to enjoy my evening, not to spar over something as basic as adequate service." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, though she refused to back down. "I'll go check again," she snapped before storming off. As Angela watched her retreat, a surge of indignation coursed through her. This wasn't merely a lapse in professionalism, it was intentional, targeted, and disrespectful. Angela's eyes wandered across the dining room, noting the cheerful servers tending to other tables with care and attentiveness, a stark contrast to the treatment she was receiving. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself and focus on why she was there. This restaurant represented years of her son's dedication and perseverance. It was Chris's legacy, his dream realized. Yet, the disrespect she was experiencing threatened to overshadow her pride in him. Across the room, she caught sight of Chris emerging from the kitchen. His sharp, attentive gaze scanned the dining area. Angela didn't call him over. She wanted to handle the matter on her own for now. Still, she silently hoped he would notice the tension brewing at her table. Angela shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hunger and irritation mingling into a knot in her stomach. Nearly an hour had passed since she placed her order, and Emily had yet to deliver her meal or anything resembling professional service. Around her, diners enjoyed lively conversations and the attentive care of their servers. Her table felt like an anomaly, a glaring exception in the otherwise warm and welcoming atmosphere. Emily reappeared, walking at a leisurely pace as she carried plates to another table. Angela raised her hand, determined to put an end to the ordeal. Emily hesitated before approaching, her annoyance palpable. "What now?" Emily asked, crossing her arms and glaring down at Angela. Angela straightened in her chair, her tone even but firm. "I'd like to know why I've been waiting almost an hour for my entree, while tables that arrived long after me have already been served." Emily let out a sharp laugh, loud enough to draw glances from nearby diners. "Maybe they're not making a fuss about every little thing," she said with a smirk. Angela's chest tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "Requesting basic service isn't making a fuss," she replied. Emily's smirk deepened, her eyes narrowing. "You people always think the world owes you something," she said, her voice low but cutting. Angela froze for a moment, disbelief washing over her. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with incredulity. "You heard me," Emily said, leaning in slightly. "Some of us work hard for what we have. Others just expect it handed to them." Heat rose in Angela's cheeks, but she refused to let Emily see her flinch. "I came here to enjoy a meal, not to be judged by someone who clearly doesn't understand professionalism." Emily scoffed. "Right, because it's my fault you're unhappy with everything," she retorted, her sarcasm dripping. Angela's jaw tightened. "I'd like to speak to the manager." Emily let out a mocking laugh. "Of course you would. Let me guess. You're going to make this some big issue. People like you always do," she said, her voice laced with disdain. Angela's hand tightened around the napkin in her lap. "And what exactly do you mean by people like me?" she asked, her tone low and deliberate. Emily tilted her head, her smirk widening. "You know exactly what I mean. Always complaining, always playing the victim. If you don't like it here, maybe you should go somewhere more your speed." Angela's stomach churned, but her voice remained steady. "Is that how you treat all your customers, or just the ones you don't think belong here?" Emily shrugged. "I treat everyone the same. Maybe you're just being too sensitive." Angela leaned forward slightly, her tone measured but icy. "Your behavior has been unprofessional, disrespectful, and blatantly discriminatory. It won't go unnoticed." Emily rolled her eyes. "Oh, give me a break. You're just blowing this out of proportion because you're looking for something to complain about." Angela's voice rose slightly, commanding the attention of nearby diners. "I've been patient and polite, but you've gone out of your way to insult me, delay my service, and make me feel unwelcome. If you think I'm going to sit here and accept that, you're mistaken." Before Emily could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air behind her. "What's going on here?" Angela turned her head and saw Chris standing a few feet away. His gaze was locked on Emily, his expression unreadable, but charged with a quiet intensity. The room seemed to shift as diners turned their attention to the scene unfolding. Emily spun around, her face paling as the voice behind her registered. Her bravado evaporated when she saw Chris standing a few feet away, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable but intense. Nothing," she stammered, her voice losing its earlier edge. "Just a misunderstanding." Chris's sharp eyes flicked to Angela, who gave him a composed but pointed look, and then back to Emily. "I'd like to hear it from the customer," he said, his tone steady and commanding. Angela leaned back slightly, feeling a wave of relief. "It seems the waitress forgot to place my order," she began, her voice calm but firm, and then decided to compensate for her mistake by making it personal. Chris's jaw tightened as he turned back to Emily, who now looked visibly uneasy. "We'll handle this in my office," he said, his tone brooking no argument. With a firm gesture, he directed Emily toward the office, and Angela followed quietly, her composure starkly contrasting Emily's stiff, defensive posture. Inside the office, Chris shut the door behind them and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. His piercing gaze settled on Emily. "Let's hear it," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. "What happened out there?" Emily crossed her arms, her eyes darting nervously between Angela and Chris. "It's just a misunderstanding," she said quickly, her tone clipped. "She got upset because her food was taking too long. I tried to explain, but she kept pushing, and things got heated." Angela tilted her head slightly, her tone calm but direct. "Pushing? Asking about an order that wasn't even submitted isn't pushing. It's basic accountability." Emily's lips curled into a defensive smirk. "See what I mean?" she snapped. "She's impossible to please. I forgot to put the order in. It happens. But instead of being reasonable about it, she had to make a scene." Chris's voice cut through her excuses like a knife. "Making a scene? You mean asking for the service she was supposed to receive in the first place?" Emily straightened, her cheeks reddening. "I said it was a mistake. People forget things. It's not like I did it on purpose." Angela's voice was calm but unwavering. "But you didn't stop there. You mocked me, made sarcastic comments, and decided to judge me instead of correcting your mistake." Emily turned toward Angela, her tone turning defensive. "I wasn't judging you. You just kept acting like everything was my fault, like I did it on purpose to ruin your night." Angela leaned forward slightly, her gaze unyielding. "If forgetting the order was a mistake, then what about your comments about people like me? Were those mistakes too?" Emily faltered, her face flushing. "That wasn't— I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. Chris's eyes narrowed. "Then explain what you did mean." Emily hesitated, her bravado cracking under the weight of his scrutiny. "I don't know. It just came out," she muttered. "She kept pushing, and I said something stupid. okay? It wasn't about her specifically. Angela arched an eyebrow. Not about me specifically? Then why the comments about people like me always complaining or me not belonging here? Emily's jaw tightened, her gaze snapping back to Angela. You're twisting my words. Chris's tone dropped to a chilling calm. No one's twisting anything. I heard you out there. You didn't just forget her order. You treated her like she didn't matter. And then you tried to justify it with comments that have no place in this restaurant or anywhere else. Emily flinched, but quickly crossed her arms tighter. Oh, come on. You've worked in restaurants before, right? You know how some customers are. They just have to find something to complain about. Angela's voice sharpened. So now it's my fault you disrespected me? Emily's eyes darted between Angela and Chris, her frustration bubbling over. I didn't disrespect you. You just took everything I said the wrong way. Why is this such a big deal? Chris leaned forward, his voice hard as steel. It's a big deal because you didn't just make a mistake. You doubled down on it. You made it personal. Emily scoffed, her tone bitter. Oh, so now I'm the villain because I didn't bend over backward for someone who came in here looking for problems? Angela stood abruptly, her presence commanding. I didn't come here looking for problems. I came here to celebrate and enjoy a meal at my son's restaurant. What I didn't expect was to be treated like I didn't belong. Emily's face drained of color. Wait. Your son? Chris straightened, his expression cold. Yes, my mother. Emily's mouth opened and closed as realization struck her like a tidal wave. I didn't know. I mean, if I'd known, it shouldn't matter, Chris interrupted, his voice rising slightly. Whether she's my mother, a regular customer, or someone walking in for the first time, everyone deserves respect, and you've made it painfully clear that you don't care about that. Emily stammered, her defenses crumbling. I wasn't thinking. Angela raised a hand, silencing her. The issue isn't whether you were thinking. The issue is that you assumed you could treat me however you wanted without consequences. Emily clenched her fists, her tone growing desperate. I've been here for years. I've worked harder than half the people out there, and you're going to throw me under the bus because I had one bad night? Chris's tone remained cold. This isn't about one bad night. I've had complaints about your attitude before, but I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Clearly, that was a mistake. Emily's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. This is ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion just because she's your mom. Chris stepped forward, his gaze unrelenting. This isn't about her being my mother. It's about you treating someone with blatant disrespect and then refusing to take responsibility for it. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but Chris held up a hand. Enough. Take a break. We're not done here. Emily huffed, her face red with anger, but stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Chris let out a heavy sigh, turning to Angela. Chris took a deep breath. Standing tall at the head of the dining room, the once busy restaurant had settled into a quiet hum as the dinner rush faded, leaving only the staff gathered before him. Angela sat off to the side, her posture poised, her eyes steady as she observed the unfolding scene. The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of curiosity and unease as the employees awaited what was to come. Emily stood among her colleagues, her arms crossed defensively, her gaze shifting nervously around the room. Her posture betrayed her discomfort, but her expression was tight, as if bracing herself for a confrontation she couldn't escape. Chris cleared his throat, and the soft murmurs ceased instantly. His presence alone commanded attention. "Thank you all for staying late tonight," he began, his voice measured but resolute. "I called this meeting because something happened during tonight's service, something that goes against everything this restaurant stands for." The room remained silent, all eyes fixed on Chris. His gaze swept over the staff, but his focus remained steady, unwavering. "Before I continue, I want to make one thing clear," he said. "This is not about assigning blame or starting a witch hunt. This is about accountability, about ensuring that the culture we've worked so hard to build here remains intact." Chris's tone sharpened slightly, though he remained calm. "Earlier this evening, one of our guests, my mother, was subjected to treatment that was not just unprofessional, but disrespectful and discriminatory. This wasn't just a lapse in service. It was a failure to uphold the very values that define us as a team and as a restaurant. Murmurs rippled through the group, eyes darting toward Emily, who stiffened visibly. Chris raised a hand, quieting the whispers. This is not just about what happened to her, he continued, his tone growing more passionate. This is about every single person who walks through these doors. Whether they're a regular, a first-time guest, or someone passing through, they deserve to be treated with respect. No exceptions. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her arms tightening across her chest. Chris's gaze turned directly to her, his voice dropping slightly, but losing none of its intensity. Emily, this is your chance to explain yourself. I want everyone here to understand your perspective, so there's no misunderstanding about what happened. Emily's eyes widened slightly at being called out so directly. She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward her co-workers before finally speaking. Look, she began, her voice defensive. I made a mistake. I forgot to put in her order. It happens. But instead of being understanding, she kept pushing and making a big deal out of it. Chris tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Pushing, he repeated, his voice calm but cutting. You mean asking about an order that wasn't submitted? That's not pushing. That's basic accountability. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she pressed on. I tried to explain, but she kept acting like I was doing it on purpose, like I was trying to ruin her night. And yeah, I got frustrated and said some things I shouldn't have, but I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. Angela, still seated to the side, spoke up for the first time. Her voice was calm but firm. Saying that people like me don't belong here and always complain isn't just frustration. It's personal, and it's hurtful. Emily turned to Angela, her tone sharpening. I didn't mean it like that. You're twisting my words. Chris stepped forward, his voice now laced with steel. No one is twisting anything, Emily. Your words were heard clearly by multiple people, and they weren't just inappropriate. They were discriminatory. That's not something we tolerate here, and it's not something I'm going to overlook. Emily's defensiveness began to falter, her confidence cracking under the weight of Chris's words. I've worked here for years, she said, her tone desperate now. I've put in more effort than most people, and you're throwing me under the bus because of one bad night? Chris's gaze hardened. This isn't about one bad night. It's about a pattern of behavior. This is not the first time I've heard complaints about your attitude, Emily. I gave you the benefit of the doubt before, but tonight you crossed a line that can't be ignored. The room was silent, the weight of Chris's words settling over the group. He turned his gaze to the rest of the staff. Let me make this clear to everyone, he said, his voice steady. This restaurant is built on respect. Respect for each other, respect for our guests, and respect for the values we uphold. If anyone thinks they're above that, they don't belong here. Emily's face was pale, her defenses fully crumbled. Chris's voice softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. You're being let go, effective immediately. This isn't just about what you said to my mother. It's about the example you've set for the rest of the team. And that example is not one I'm willing to tolerate. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Chris held up a hand, silencing her. Enough. You've had your chance to explain, and the decision has been made. I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect on your actions and how they affect others. Emily turned abruptly, storming out of the room without another word. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud, leaving the room in stunned silence. Chris turned back to the staff, his expression softer now, but no less serious. Let this serve as a reminder to all of us, he said. This restaurant is more than just a business. It's a reflection of the values we believe in. If we don't uphold those values, we fail, not just as a team, but as individuals. Angela watched him with quiet pride, a small smile curving her lips. Chris's words carried weight, and she could see the impact they had on the staff. The room was filled with a sense of resolution, a clear understanding of what was expected moving forward. Chris exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Thank you all for staying. Let's move forward together and ensure this remains a place we can all be proud of. Angela rose from her seat, meeting her son's gaze. That was well handled, she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Chris smiled faintly. Thanks, Mom. Let me finally get you that dinner. Angela chuckled. I think we've both earned it. Chris stood at the front of the staff, his gaze steady as the murmurs of the room quieted. The tension was thick, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Emily stood among the group, her arms crossed tightly. Her expression hardened, though her discomfort was evident. "This restaurant was built on a simple idea," Chris began, his voice firm but calm. "Everyone deserves respect. It doesn't matter if they're a first-time diner, a regular, a CEO, or a dishwasher. Every single person who walks through those doors should feel welcome. When that doesn't happen, we fail. Not just as individuals, but as a team." Angela sat silently to the side, observing as Chris's words settled over the room. Some staff members nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. Emily's jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Chris continued, his tone growing sharper. "Tonight, one of our customers was treated in a way that was completely unacceptable. She was ignored, disrespected, and spoken to in a manner that has no place in this restaurant, or anywhere else." Emily's cheeks flushed, and she opened her mouth as if to speak, but Chris held up a hand. "Not yet," he said firmly. "You'll have your chance." He turned his attention to the rest of the staff. "I want to make something very clear. This isn't just about one mistake. Mistakes happen. We all know that. But how you handle those mistakes matters. Taking responsibility matters. Treating people with dignity matters." Chris paused, letting his words hang in the air before continuing. "What happened tonight wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice to treat someone differently based on assumptions, biases, and personal attitudes. And those attitudes have no place here." Emily stepped forward slightly, her voice defensive. "I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I was stressed, and—" Chris cut her off, his voice unwavering. "This isn't about what you meant. It's about what you did. And what you did hurt someone. Your words and actions weren't just rude. They were discriminatory." The room fell silent, Chris's words weighing heavily on everyone. Emily shifted uncomfortably, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. "I already said I was sorry," she muttered. "What else do you want from me?" Angela, who had remained quiet until now, rose from her seat. Her voice was calm but carried authority. "An apology means nothing if it isn't followed by accountability," she said, her gaze steady as it rested on Emily. "You can't just brush this off as stress or a bad day. You went out of your way to make me feel unwelcome, like I didn't belong here. If you can't acknowledge that, then your apology is hollow." Emily's face burned, and she looked away, avoiding Angela's gaze. "I didn't mean it like that," she muttered again. Chris stepped forward, his tone firm but not unkind. "Then what did you mean, Emily? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you made a lot of assumptions tonight, and those assumptions hurt someone." Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her defensiveness began to crumble under the weight of her co-workers' stares. I didn't think it was a big deal," she said finally, her voice faltering. "I mean, I guess I just assumed." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You assumed I wouldn't matter?" Emily's head snapped up, her face pale. "No, I didn't mean that. But that's what your actions said," Angela interrupted, her tone sharp. "Whether you admit it or not, that's how you treated me. Like I didn't matter. And that's the problem." Chris nodded, his expression firm. "And that's why you can't stay here, Emily. I've given you chances before, more than I probably should have. But this isn't just about me or my mother. It's about the values this restaurant is built on. And your actions tonight proved that you don't share those values." Emily's face crumpled, her voice rising in desperation. "You're firing me over this?" Chris's tone softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "I'm letting you go because this isn't the first time your attitude has been a problem. Tonight was the breaking point. I can't have someone on my team who doesn't respect the people we serve, or the people they work with." Emily's gaze darted around the room, searching for support, but the silence was deafening. She turned back to Chris, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to get this far, and yet it did," Chris said simply. "Now it's time to move forward." Emily's shoulders sagged as the weight of the situation sank in. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. The room remained silent until the door closed behind her. Chris turned back to his staff, his expression resolute. Let this be a reminder of what we stand for: respect, integrity, and accountability. If we can't uphold those values, we don't deserve to call ourselves a team. Angela watched as the staff slowly nodded in agreement, the tension in the room giving way to a sense of unity. The restaurant had quieted considerably by the time Chris returned to Angela's table. The hum of conversation and clinking plates was replaced with a peaceful stillness, broken only by the faint music playing overhead. Angela sat by the window, a steaming plate of salmon and vegetables before her, finally enjoying the meal she had waited so long for. Chris slid into the seat across from her, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "How's the food?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Angela set her fork down carefully and met his gaze. "Delicious," she said warmly. "But more importantly, how are you?" Chris sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I'll be honest, I feel drained. That wasn't easy. Firing someone never is, even when it's the right thing to do." Angela nodded knowingly. "It's never supposed to be easy, Chris. If it were, you wouldn't be doing it right." Chris gave a faint chuckle, running a hand through his hair. "I just hope the team understands why I had to do it." Angela took a sip of water, her gaze soft. "They will. You made your message clear, and you did it the right way. That's what matters." Chris leaned against the patio railing, his gaze fixed on Emily as her words faltered. The evening air was quiet, save for the faint rustling of leaves, creating a moment of stillness between them. Emily's hands twisted nervously around the strap of her handbag, her posture tense, but her expression more earnest than Chris had ever seen. "I know I said sorry before," she continued, her voice wavering, "but it wasn't real. I was defensive, and I didn't really understand what I had done. I thought I was just being stressed or that you were blowing things out of proportion. But now," she hesitated, glancing at the ground before meeting his eyes again. "Now I see it. I see how I made her feel, how I made you feel, and how wrong I was." Chris's expression remained unreadable, though his silence urged her to continue. "I lost my job, and honestly, I deserved to," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It forced me to take a hard look at myself, at how I treat people, and the kind of person I've become. I don't want to be that person anymore." Chris folded his arms across his chest, his tone measured. "It's good that you've reflected on what happened, but words only mean so much. What do you want from me, Emily?" Emily's shoulders slumped, and her bravado crumbled entirely. "I'm not here to ask for my job back," she said quickly. "I know that bridge has been burned. She took a deep breath, her voice steadying. "I wanted to take responsibility, to tell you that I see now why what I did was so harmful. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a reflection of biases I didn't even realize I had. And I'm sorry, truly." Chris tilted his head, studying her closely. "It takes courage to admit that," he said after a moment, "but understanding isn't the same as change. What have you done since then to make sure this doesn't happen again?" Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. I've been reading about bias, about respect, about how to treat people with dignity. I've also started volunteering at a community center. It's been eye-opening, seeing the challenges others face, and realizing how narrow my perspective was." Chris's stance softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. "That's a start," he said, "but change takes time, and it takes consistency." Emily nodded earnestly. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying, that I get it now." Chris let out a slow breath, the tension in his shoulders easing. "If what you're saying is true, then I respect the effort you're making. But understand this, Emily. What happened that night wasn't just about you or my mother. It was about setting a standard for everyone. That's why I couldn't let it slide." Emily swallowed hard, her voice quiet but sincere. "I understand, and I respect you for that." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past hanging between them. Finally, Emily shifted awkwardly, clutching her bag tighter. "I'll go now. I just wanted to say what I needed to say." Chris nodded, his tone softening. "I hope you stick to the path you're on, Emily, for your sake and for the sake of those you interact with in the future." Emily managed a faint smile, her eyes glistening slightly. "Thank you for hearing me out." She turned and walked away, her steps slow but purposeful. Chris watched her go, his mind a swirl of thoughts. When he returned to the dining room, Angela was waiting at her usual table, her expression curious. "That looked serious," she said gently. Chris sat down across from her, his shoulders relaxing as he let out a breath. Emily came back to apologize. She said she's been reflecting and trying to change. Angela's brows lifted slightly. "Do you believe her?" Chris considered the question for a moment before nodding slowly. "I think she's sincere. But it's not about what I believe. It's about what she does from here on out. Time will tell if she's really learned." Angela gave him a small, approving smile. "You handled that well. It's not easy to confront the past, but it's even harder to listen with an open mind." Chris leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I guess I learned from the best." Angela chuckled softly, her pride evident. "You've done more than learn, Chris. You've led, and that's what will keep this place thriving." As the restaurant buzzed softly around them, Chris glanced at the familiar faces of his team and the diners who filled the space. The challenges of the past month had tested him, but they had also reinforced the values he held dear, to staying true to the vision. Chris said quietly, lifting his glass to his mother once more. "To the vision," Angela echoed, her smile warm and full of pride. The soft clink of their glasses resonated through the air, a testament to the power of accountability, growth, and unwavering resolve. Emily's hands trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I acted out of line. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I said things I shouldn't have." Angela appeared quietly on the patio, her calm yet commanding presence instantly shifting the energy. She had followed them outside, unnoticed, but now her voice cut through the night air with precision. "Emily," Angela began, her tone steady but edged with curiosity, "if you've been thinking so much about your actions, let me ask you something." Emily blinked, startled, her gaze snapping to Angela. Sure," she stammered, clearly caught off guard. Angela stepped closer, her posture poised, her eyes unyielding. "Why, of all people, would you say and believe the things you did while working for a black man?" Her words landed heavily, each syllable deliberate. "Did you think Chris wouldn't notice? Did you think it didn't matter?" Emily's face flushed deep crimson as she looked down, fumbling for a response. I didn't think about it like that," she muttered, her voice shaky. "It wasn't about him." Angela tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving Emily. "Then what was it about? Me? People who look like me? What made you think it was acceptable to treat me, or anyone else, that way?" Emily's voice cracked under the weight of Angela's questions. "I don't know," she admitted, her words faltering. "I guess I was frustrated, and I didn't mean to." Angela's tone sharpened, though her voice remained calm and controlled. "Frustration doesn't make you a racist, Emily. It just exposes what's already there." Emily swallowed hard, her hands now trembling visibly. "I grew up around people who thought like that," she blurted out, her voice tinged with desperation. "I know it's not an excuse, but it's how I was raised. I've never really, I don't know, unlearned it." Angela's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "Unlearning it starts with acknowledging it," she said, her voice unwavering. "But acknowledging it isn't enough. You have to make a choice to do better every single day. And tonight is as good a night as any to start." Emily nodded slowly, her face crumpling as the weight of Angela's words hit her. "I'm trying," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I swear, I'm trying." Angela studied her carefully, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she stepped back, her presence still commanding. "Then keep trying," Angela said evenly. "But not here. That bridge is burned. Whether you rebuild it somewhere else is entirely up to you." Chris finally broke his silence, his voice steady but firm. "Emily, my mother is right. This isn't about us anymore. It's about you. Whether you take this lesson to heart is your decision, and no one else's." Emily nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for even letting me say this." Angela gave her a final nod, her voice gentler now. "Good luck, Emily. I hope you figure it out." Emily turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped as she disappeared into the night. The silence that followed felt heavier than the confrontation itself, a quiet echo of accountability lingering in the air. Chris turned to Angela, his expression a mixture of gratitude and weariness. "Thanks for stepping in," he said softly. "You always know how to cut to the heart of things." Angela smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and determination. "Sometimes people need to hear the truth," she replied. "Whether they choose to listen is on them." Chris nodded, exhaling deeply. "I just hope she does." Angela looked at him, her gaze steady and filled with quiet wisdom. "And if she doesn't, at least she knows someone held her accountable. That alone is a step forward." Chris allowed a small smile to cross his face as the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "You're right, as always." Angela chuckled softly, her warmth cutting through the heavy atmosphere. "Don't forget it." The two stood in silence for a moment, the faint hum of the restaurant behind them, a gentle reminder of the world they were working to build. A world rooted in respect, accountability, and unwavering integrity.